The previous basket is under review.
For about 24 hours there this week, Gonzaga was the #1 team in the country on KenPom, climbing from preseason number 8, thanks to some absolutely dominant performances. Most recently, beating Southern Utah 122-50, which is just a ridiculous final. I mean, we can all agree. And Gonzaga has been as good as anyone at not playing with their food and just blowing the doors off of bad teams over the years. But you tend not to win games by 72 and not be really good. You tend not to be 3-0 early against high major opponents in Oklahoma and Arizona State, all by double figures, unless you're really good. They have climbed the metrics for a reason. But, I think there's still probably some outstanding skepticism. I think the AP poll would reflect that. I think kind of general sentiment around the Zags will, demonstrate that. Fawcett, and I'm sure part of that is the history, and they didn't win the national championship before. Like, why is it coming now? But I think a lot of it is some of the preseason lingering questions and how it all comes together. But so far they have been very impressive, and we figured it'd be a good time a couple weeks into the season to dive into the film, see what we're seeing, say, look, is this team for real? Is this a tier 1 national championship level team? I'm not going to say the #1 team in the country, right? This is, it's too early, and there's not enough data points for us to say definitively this is the best team in college basketball. But I think there's a lot that we can learn so far, and certainly a very impressive start to the year for a team that, quite frankly, had questions to answer in the preseason. At least nationally, the perception was very much like, oh, we'll see about the point guards, and we'll see about this, we'll see about that. They've answered the bell pretty well so far.
It seems like everyone has made up their decision of what Gonzaga is going into every year. Like, everyone is like, oh, they will be okay. They'll have some guys we haven't heard of that are going to emerge. They're going to have a good seed, and then they'll make a second weekend, and then they'll lose out. Of course, you've got some more negative people that just continue to say that Gonzaga chokes every year in the tournament, despite it being untrue, like, objectively. But it does seem like this was one of the years that they've had some of the least discussion that that I can remember, like, ever. So that is a certain change. And I also think even when they made their schedule, some of these games scheduled more in advance, I think that they probably thought that some of these earlier ones, they probably thought Oklahoma would be a little bit better than they were, probably hoped that Arizona State would be a little bit better than they were, but probably knew a little bit what that one was. And then, you get Creighton at home. You probably think that Creighton team is also going to be a little bit better than what we've seen. So there was still a little bit of skepticism, even as they were just running those teams. And it is interesting because most bye game wins do not move the needle for anyone. But then when Gonzaga beat Southern Utah by 1 million, suddenly people are really wanting to talk about them, which does not really happen after too many wins. But that just speaks to the run that Gonzaga has been on. And I do think, for me, who was a little bit slow to start watching them, I wasn't tapping into their Texas Southern game. I didn't watch Oklahoma. I subsequently went back to watch it for this video, but it's something that, as I took note, I saw, wow, this is not the Gonzaga that everyone has just assumed going into every single year how Gonzaga is going to look. Because for a lot of years they had a very similar roster makeup. It's not like it's a crazy difference here, but they have constructed a roster differently. They are playing a different style, and for that reason, I do think this is a really interesting team. That even if you are the biggest Gonzaga skeptic, I think you should go watch some of their games in the non-conference here, because you are going to see a different look than you've seen the last decade.
Yeah, and we'll get to some of the maybe structural stuff, particularly defensively, here as the video goes on. But I do think in the preseason, if you were a Gonzaga buyer, if you were talking yourself into this team being a elite team in college basketball, the reason you were doing it was you were a Mario Saint-Supery buyer, right? This is a guy who was a key rotation player in the ACB last year. The ACB, as we have talked about on the show, is the best non-NBA domestic league in the world. He did that at 18 years old. It was highly impressive to get him to come to college. And I think there was a feeling that there would be a little bit of an adjustment period, and there has been. But he has really shown some flashes. He's playing in a highly efficient brand of basketball and has taken to college very smoothly. And it's not an easy thing for a lot of these, especially younger European guys coming over, but he's made a major impact, and it feels like he's really just scratching the surface in my eyes as he continues to develop.
Yeah, it's one of the things we'll have to talk about more when we keep talking about these European guys coming to college. But the thing is, for these young guys that are playing in great leagues like the ACB, is like they've got to be complementary players at that level. And now, you get them at the high major level, and suddenly like they've got to be your engines. And for him to take on this role of creator, like one thing I love with look at all these clips, he's getting a paint touch on every possession and making the right move, whether it's give up the ball for a scoring option or just re-space. We've seen a number of these plays where he gets right to the nail, collapses the defense, moves the ball, he re-spaces, and then he gets a wide open three. And that's where the game looks so easy for him, because it's just oh, I'm going to glide, I'm going to get to the nail, I'm going to give up the ball, I'm going to re-space, and then suddenly I've got a wide open three. And you're like, man, how does this look so easy? And it's because he's got that skill to get that paint touch. He's got the knowledge to know where to go with it, and that basketball IQ to re-space. And it's a lot of fun. And then you see some of that flash with the passing. Watch this one on the loose ball. One touch, whips it up the floor. He's so much fun to watch with that kind of vision and flair. And it's making a lot of his teammates better. So yeah, you saw that kind of flashy one-hand pass off the steal. You see here him just kind of keeping his dribble alive in the paint, finding his teammate. This one, he could not have laid up more perfectly. Beautiful touch on that inbounds. You know that Gonzaga wants to play fast. Watch as he's able to get that ball up the floor in no time, find a shooter that isn't picked up. So in a lot of ways, he's exactly what Gonzaga has always wanted from their point guards in terms of this, play fast, move the ball, get it up the floor quick. But he's also bringing a lot more flash, a lot more scoring. And I think that that's a lot of fun. And then defensively, and we'll talk about that a little bit more, I think he's really having an impact as well. So I have just been super, super impressed.
Yeah. And, he's also bigger, I think, than people realize. Like when you look at him just watching film, you're like, oh, that guy's taller than I envisioned him being. I think he's listed at 6'3", about $180, but that's perfectly good size for a point guard in college hoops. And so, overall, a really nice start for him. And it's also valuable to note that they have that maybe more traditional game manager point guard too. And they've basically split time early on. And that's Braden Smith, not the Braden Smith, the Colgate Braden Smith, excuse me, who's a very good player. Probably limited just talent wise for this level. A little small, not super dynamic as a shot maker and a scorer, but he's managing the game. He's averaging 5 assists a game in less than 20 minutes, and that's really valuable to have, right? They have if they need someone who can just kind of get them into actions and flow into their post ups, they can do that. And if they want to say, "Hey, Mario, go take over the game," he's got an opportunity to do that. So, I think overall it's been about as good a start as you could have hoped. And I think, again, the runway for him is just so long. There's a world where we look up in February and Mario Saint-Supery is just dominating games. And that is probably the scary thing. If you're looking around at Gonzaga right now, it's man, their ceiling has not been hit yet because this guy is only just starting to play at the level I think he's capable of. But, those clips of the defense, I think, are a good transition point, Fawcett, because Gonzaga's a top 3 defense on KenPom right now. And again, part of that is, you allow 50 points to Southern Utah. That's a good way to juice the numbers. 43 to Texas Southern. I mean, both of those teams, they had 0.59 and 0.61 points per possession, respectively. But all 3 high major opponents were all under 1. They've been very, very good on that end of the floor. Third would be the best defense since 2017 when they were the number 1 defense in the country and went to the championship game. That's better than the Chet year. It's better. I'm not quite convinced that number will stick, but they have been a lot more disruptive defensively than I remember them being in quite some time. They have a little bit more athleticism, I think, across the board, especially on the wings. And they're making you feel them, I think, defensively a lot more than they have the last couple of years, where maybe it's just been a little too easy to play against Gonzaga.
Yeah, even going back to some of those teams you were talking about that were really good defensively, I thought they were a little bit more conservative and really good in their structure. Where look at this team. I mean, everyone's going to say, hey, don't help from the strong side corner. But anyone who knows and watches our videos or maybe watch the NBA finals where Oklahoma City just suffocated everyone with this, but really good defenses help from the corners. And that's something that you see Saint-Supery very, very good at. Look, as he times all of these attacks, looks for that like blind spot, that kind of point of no return where he can leave his man and the player with the ball isn't able to actually kind of punish the defense. So you're seeing them being so much more disruptive, one pass away, so much more aggressive. And you can see just how scrambled it's making their opponents. Even if they don't come up with a steal, it is really heating them up and making it difficult for them to make the right decision. They've got that length to make the like bigger closeouts and still contest shooters once they've helped in the gap. That's big. And it's also allowed them to be really aggressive on the ball. Like watching them guard ball screens, like they're getting after it. Like they're trying to take the ball out of guys' hands. Look at how stacked they are on the strong side of the floor and force a really difficult baseline pass. Like they're really heating up their opponents. They're making it difficult for them to do anything easy. And I think it's had really good results. And obviously you need to have personnel for that. And that's something that has been really good for Gonzaga. And look at the athleticism that especially like a Tyon Grant Foster is bringing, where when he's the low man, suddenly you've got like a wing, like not even a big, who is like contesting guys at the top of the box on the backboard and taking away easy attempts. Even when you think you've got the beat, you've hit a cutter, there's length everywhere. And this is again where I think Gonzaga has a different look than what people kind of prototypically think. For them to be aggressive, running around, trapping teams, getting dig down steals one pass away. Oh, if you think you've beat them and got something at the rim, someone's pinning your shot on the backboard. Like that probably hasn't been people's perspective of Gonzaga basketball. And that's where this team does look very different. And I think that what you're saying is like totally accurate. Like, yeah, they've got more athletes. Do they have the kind of athletes that have the number one defense in the country? Like maybe not, but what I really like about their style is I don't think they're the best defense in the country. Maybe they're not a top 3, maybe they're not a top 5 defense in the country. But when you play the style that's really disruptive, that can cover up mistakes with shot blocking at the end, in one game scenarios, they could really, really frustrate someone and really, really have some big games, force 10 or 12 steals that turn into points that we know Gonzaga can score in transition. So I just think that this style is going to be a lot more conducive to NCAA tournament success than what we've seen in recent years for Gonzaga. And for Gonzaga and at least the national perception, for them, it's all about NCAA tournament success at this point. I mean, it's unfortunate. But that is the fact of the matter for people's perspective of Gonzaga and Mark Few is NCAA tournament success. So yeah, that's clips. Again, if you're a Gonzaga fan, I think you should be, watching that film we just showed and be very happy.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that the defense was the biggest concern for Gonzaga in the preseason. And part of that's the recent struggles, 73rd in 2023, 51st in 2024. They turned it on late last year to get to 29. I think I looked at this in the preseason. If you stop the season at Valentine's Day, they were 50th again or something in that ballpark. So they have been, a bad high major defense, quite frankly, especially considering the benefit you probably get from playing, just overwhelming opponents with your talent in the WCC. That's not good enough. And they have totally flipped that on its head this year. So credit to them. I was worried that it was sort of a personnel thing, that I thought that if you have two, you're going to play big a lot with Ike and Huff, and neither is super, super mobile, and neither is a particularly impactful rim protector. I just thought it sort of really capped their ceiling on that end of the floor. And that's where, I think Grant Foster's weak side rim protection is massive. That's where, I think guys like Saint-Supery's ability to kind of jump passing lanes and be disruptive is massive. It's where even just the energy and effort that Emmanuel Inocente brings as a on ball, that dude never scores. That dude really doesn't do a whole lot statistically to impact the game. But I do think when you're talking about the mental warfare that Gonzaga is playing with you, when bodies are coming from everywhere, and then, oh, by the way, they've got this 6'6" guy that just trails the ball handler all the time and gets into you and makes you work. I remember when we did our Iowa State videos and our Houston videos, we talk about just how mentally taxing it is to play against them. And Gonzaga's not to that level yet, but there is this feeling, I think, when you watch them of you're just waiting for people to make a mistake. And if you can continue to be disruptive that way, yeah, there's gonna be times where you just blow people up and things fall apart really quickly. And you give up a 10-0 run against Gonzaga. Good luck. ball game, kill shot, as Savamia says. So, very impressive. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from this video is the potential defensively that they just haven't shown the last couple of years. But I do think the last point we probably should mention is, I talked about EK and Huff and maybe the concerns that they brought defensively, but offensively, they're a handful because you have two guys that are highly, highly skilled, can both post up, can both stretch the floor. I mean, EK, I think, made 4 threes against Creighton. They're very interchangeable in a lot of ways, and there's just very few teams that have the personnel to deal with this. And to be clear, I think part of Gonzaga's success early on is the fact that the teams they have played, these high major teams, not only have struggled, but personnel wise are just not built to play against Gonzaga. You have, Oklahoma, Oklahoma has one big, and his name is Mohamed Wagee. He's like he's not a very good player. Creighton's small, and Owen Freeman's not a good defensive five. Arizona State has a freshman and more Masamba Diop. And quite frankly, their big test next week is Alabama, who's also really small. There's a world where Gonzaga is inflating itself based on its front court just dominating people. I do think there's more than that in the video, but I do think when you look at the way that they're playing offensively, they're causing some problems, but it'll be interesting to see when they play teams that have a little bit more size, physicality up front to match them.
Yeah, so one thing I do like is when you talk about the kind of utilization of the bigs, we've talked so much on this channel going back to last year about this duck-in ball screen offense that a lot of teams like Florida have really popularized as well, that they took from View. But when you look at the way that they're getting these post touches, I really like a lot of these offense, like a lot of these weaves up top, this continuity ball screen where then a guard ducks in, sets a back screen, and you've got a really deep post catch for an EK. So I do think that they've modernized a little bit of the way that they've gotten those touches, which is good. But when it comes to their transition attack, they just put pressure on you right away with these rim runs, these bigs that are just putting their nose on the rim, turning around and sealing a guy. And this is where I think you start to look at the opponents like Sweeney was talking about that are just like undersized. Like when you just walk the ball up the floor, jog the ball up the floor, and it's a 5 that just like goes and seals and gets a deep catch. Like we'll see how real that is when they eventually play a lot more legitimate size. But it is also one of those things that like you can't really fault them for just like taking what is there for them and completely just turning it into easy points. And you still see again some of these plays as well where like the opposing 5's just getting bullied by EK and just like post pin, pushing guys out of the lane. And we'll see exactly how it works. But one thing I do like as well is when they're getting double teamed, they fill that opposite dunker spot, so they make it really hard to double from anywhere else. And then like you look at EK, like he's completely unbothered. He knows exactly where the help is coming from, and it's an easy pass down to Huff. So I do think this is also really impressive, the way that these two bigs have operated and taken advantage of any possible double teams, and that has made them tough to guard. And what I do think will be interesting to see if Huff can do a little bit more of this. Like, can he be someone who, yes, of course, everyone wants to see him like make shots, but can he be someone that is also able to just provide some of that attack at closeout, get downhill? We've seen some moments of that as well. And that's something that I think everyone just talks about when you've got two bigs, like, oh, can someone shoot? Can someone like sit and make a wide open catch and shoot 3? Like that is important. But what really is nice is if you can have one of those guys be able to catch, attack at closeout, get a paint touch, either finish themselves or turn things, get the dominoes falling. And to see a couple of those clips from Huff was nice. But man, it does all kind of come back to a lot of those clips. You're like, wow, the opposing centers are not providing a lot of resistance.
Yeah, no question. I think it'll be harder for them at times. I think probably the way I would frame it is, and I had a great conversation during the Final Four last year with Kevin Hovde, who is the Florida offensive coordinator, now the head coach at Columbia. And what Hovde said basically was their style of play, which is in a way influenced by Gonzaga. And in particular, like the way that their bigs play. Like that was all about the floor. Like they built themselves to a ridiculously high floor because they had these high level bigs that could, help you dominate the glass, help you score around the rim, keep possessions going, whatever. And then when you have elite talent and when everything else just like stacks on top to the ceiling, right? So like to me, the way I view Gonzaga right now is Huff and EK gave them an incredibly high floor, because there's going to be games, even when it doesn't look the prettiest, that they're just able to generate buckets because those two guys you can throw it to and they can go get one on the block. And they're going to help you rebound. They're going to help you with all these things, right? And then from there, it's like, okay, well, Mario's a hit. And now we're playing defense on the perimeter at a much higher level. Just like last year with Martin and Richard for Florida, right? And oh, by the way, now we have Adam Miller making shots at a really high level, right? Like all these things are just stacking on top of this like really high baseline that Gonzaga is already at because of these bigs. And to me, if it all comes together, that's the type of team Gonzaga could have. Now, again, I still want to see it, right? And I don't know that we've seen it yet against good enough competition. And maybe Vegas will provide that. I think Alabama is certainly the best team they played. But to me, the difference is Gonzaga very, very good again, the way they were last year. Like, are they like a top 10-ish KenPom team, or are they a tier 1 title contender? That gap is how real is some of this defensive stuff? How real is Mario? And I think for the most part, it's real. Like it's not this. I hate like the framing of this. Like, no, is it real or not? Like, yeah, like they are improved in these areas. That gives them a chance. I do think talent-wise, they're still not quite to the level of when they've had their best teams, and I wonder about that in March, especially compared to some of the other top teams in the sport. But their recipe is pretty potent, and they're getting a lot of good basketball from a lot of really good players right now, and that's a really positive sign early on for the Zags, whether you're buying them as like the second best team or the 9th best team in college basketball.
Yeah, like you said, the floor from the front court's pretty massive, and to me, I look at the upside or what is their ceiling as. Do they have the guys that can kind of create a shot late when it's going to be tougher again, I'm still talking NCAA tournament, I suppose, which is maybe unfair to go there right away. But for Gonzaga, just thinking about, I really like Mario Saint-Supery. Is that someone who in maybe a late clock isolation possession can really get you on at a big point of a game? Someone we haven't talked about is like Adam Miller, who has shown some offensive upside, but maybe isn't known particularly for the winning his teams have done. And like, is that someone who can emerge and bring some of that scoring?
Respect freshman year 1 seed Adam Miller in the COVID year. Come on.
That's true. Underrating that. I should. Yeah. Thanks for correcting.
It is amazing. Like Adam Miller was basically a 5th starter in the COVID year as like on a very good team. And he's spun like around the clock. He's had injuries. He's gone other places. And now he's just back to like homeostasis as the 5th starter on like a probably like 1 or a 2 seed.
And he could play a valuable role where if around him is guys that can really defend and make plays with Mario, and he can be someone who can knock down some big shots. Like I do think that's going to be a little bit of their potentially of like how high is their ceiling. But yeah, the floor that the front court and the defense brings seems to be very high. And of course, if you are one of the just absolute haters that thinks that Gonzaga somehow gets upset every year, despite that not being the case, like it's very hard to imagine like playing this style. Like we've seen what they've done in bye games so far, which is not exactly the like 200-ish KenPom teams you run into as a high seed in the NCAA tournament in the first round. But like, it's just hard to imagine them having a really bad showing and getting upset because if nothing else, that defense in the front court is going to play. And yeah, I see this Alabama game emerging as one of the biggest games of the non-conference season when I think both teams have played so well. And we've seen again how Gonzaga has guarded teams that aren't great offensively really well. We've seen how they've been able to really be aggressive and erase shots at the rim. Well, I mean, yeah, now you're going to play Alabama, who I think is really, really good offensively and gets a whole lot of guards getting downhill to the rim. And we'll see if that shot blocking is for real. So would not be surprised if we end up maybe even talking a little bit of Gonzaga next week. We'll see what happens though.
Yeah, that'll be a monster game. I just saw Alabama against Illinois. And Illinois is big like Gonzaga, but plays a lot differently. Like they're much more spread out, and Alabama switched them 1-5 most of the game. And then when guys would catch it on the block, they'd send help and kind of confuse you where it was coming from and bothered Merkovich. I think it will be harder to do that with Gonzaga. Like the style of play wise, like Gonzaga's not as easy a team to switch, especially if they're going to play out of the post as much as they will. But I'm sure Nate will have a plan. He's one of the best coaches in college basketball. So that'll be a fun game. I do think Gonzaga probably wins, but I think I've picked against Alabama in all 4 of these big games, or all 4 of these big games, and so far they're 2-1. So what do I know? But yeah, Zags are really good. Doing it a little differently this time around. We'll see if that leads to some more success. We'll certainly have more on the Zags throughout the year, and certainly plenty on the Burner Ball Basketball Review, Discord and website. We've got the great podcast, great written content. There was an amazing story the other day about Ibuka Corey from Stanford, but really, from the Gonzaga to IU Indy, they're covering it all over there. So check that out. We will see you all next week with more Scout Team. Happy Thanksgiving, and subscribe to the show.